everyone. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Tonight we're going to be learning Torah. Thank you for being here. Shavua Tov. I hope you have a great week. Shabbos went out about an hour and a half ago, I believe. And we're going to learn Torah. And good for you, and I'm very proud of you for prioritizing Torah learning in your life, and you should be very proud of yourself too. Today was a massive day. Today was a big day. Probably, I would say, the biggest day on the chassidic calendar. But whether you're a chassid or not, whether you're Chabad or not, today's a big day. I think it's a big day for the world. It's a big day for the universe. It's a big day for everyone. And we're going to talk about what it is, and we're going to learn a little bit in a few minutes. But even if you're not Chabad or you're not Jewish or whoever you are, whoever's watching this, if Chabad or if the Rebbe or if Chabad Chassidus, Chabad Torah, has ever touched your life in any way, today is a big day for you. And I'm going to explain to you why now. So there are two big things that happened on the 10th day of the Hebrew month of Shvat, what we call Yud Shvat. Number one, the 6th Lubavitcher Rebbe passed away on Yud Shvat 1950. And number two, a year later to the day, 10th of Shvat 1951, the 7th Lubavitcher Rebbe, who we know as the Rebbe, became the new leader of Chabad. So these are the two big things that happened on the 10th day of Shvat. Now just to finish my introduction so we can start learning and you can understand how prolific and how historic this document is. This Myar, this piece of Torah, literally changed my life. I know sometimes I say that about other things. Before we go into what this is, just want to tell you that I learned this when I was about 15 or 16 years old as a miserable teenager. This Myar is really like the antidote to depression. I'm not talking clinical depression. I'm talking depression of like seeing the world and thinking it's so dark and everything sucks and where is God and he abandoned us. This is what you have to learn. This really gave me life as a teenager. I was very unhappy for personal reasons and just like seeing the world and being so dissatisfied, and teenagers are very complicated in general, but learning this really gave me strength, and it connected me to my Rebbe, and it connected me to the 6th Lubavitcher Rebbe for eternity. So where was I? So what does this have to do with Yud Shvat? Well, I'll tell you. The first thing that happened on Yud Shvat was that the 6th Lubavitcher Rebbe passed away. Well, in 1950, before he passed away, for a little while before 1950, he was very, very, very sick, very ill. And at one point, he lost his ability to speak. Now, this was very traumatic for Chassidim, for Chabad Chassidim, because although the connection between a Chassid and a Rebbe, a Chassid is a student of the Rebbe, although that connection is soul, it's like a connection of the soul, which in my opinion, a lot of times is subconscious. I would say like the human connection between a chassid and a rebbe is through speech. Like the conscious connection, the way you feel close to a rebbe is to hear their Torah, to listen to what they're saying and learn their Torah and study it. Whenever anyone to this day asks me, I have a lot of women asking me this sometimes, actually, like some people will message me or ask me in real time. They'll say, Rachalea, how do I feel more connected to the rebbe? And I always say the same thing. You just have to learn his teachings. Listen to the words he spoke. You know, the Rebbe passed away already, but you can read his words. So anyways, very traumatic for the Chassidim. And every word they got from the Rebbe was like gold, right? It was like such a gift. But the Rebbe lost his ability to speak, and it was very sad and very traumatic, and he was very ill. Now, with all of this in mind, that's the context of 1950. Now let's talk about this. On the 7th day of the Hebrew month of Shvat, again, 3 days later, the 6th Lubavitcher Rebbe would pass away. So no one knows this right now. But on the 7th day, so 3 days before, the Rebbe, the 6th Lubavitcher Rebbe, had written down a Maamar. He had written down this really, really long teaching, which is, to me, again, life-changing. This is just like foundation shaking. Like it is soul-stirring. Anyways, he wrote this down because he couldn't speak, right? And he gave it to his son-in-law, whose name is Menachem Mendel Schneerson, who was destined to become the 7th Lubavitcher Rebbe, right? So he gave it to him and he said, in 3 days time, I want you to give this Myar, this piece of Torah that I wrote. I can't speak, right? I don't know how he's saying this. Maybe he's writing it down. I don't know. I can't speak, but I wrote it down. I want you in 3 days, in honor of my grandmother's yard site, the day that she passed away, the anniversary of the day of her passing, I want you to give this out to all of Chabad. I want everyone to have this document, this teaching, in their hands in 3 days. Now again, no one knew that in 3 days he would die. So it's very important before we learn this to understand the magnitude and the weight of this teaching. When our Rebbe, the 7th Lubavitcher Rebbe, who was not the Rebbe yet, when he gave this out, again, he was just the son-in-law at that time. When he gave this out 3 days later, the entire Chabad was holding a document, the last final words of a man that they loved with all their heart and soul, with a man that was like the center of their life. They were holding his last words on the day that he died, meaning they were holding his last will and testament right when he passed away. And that's very like haunting almost, and powerful and eerie. And that's why this is so famous. Again, this is a Myar, a teaching by the sixth Lubavitch Rebbe called Basi Lagani. That's in Hebrew. It means I've come to my garden. And I want you guys to understand what this is. This is the last will and testament of the sixth Lubavitch Rebbe, a colossus, a giant, a Rebbe. These are his last words. In my opinion, everything he ever taught, everything he ever said, everything he actually truly believed in, everything he lived for, this man worked and worked and worked to spread Torah and to bring Mashiach and to, he was the Rebbe during the Holocaust, whatever. Everything he ever did, everything he ever thought is in this Myar. And you can feel it. And that's why I like to teach it to everyone, because the microcosmic and macrocosmic, like the individual and the group, losing my train of thought, mission, like the mission for every person in this life, whether it's like the world and as an individual, it's in here somewhere. I promise you. We're going to learn a little part of it tonight, but when we're done, try to learn the rest. Get a teacher, find a teacher online. There's so many people who teach this. It encapsulates everything, like actually everything. You will find yourself in this Myar somehow. And just a side note that there are well over 20 Basi Laganis. There might even be 30 or 40 Basi Laganis because, so this is what I was saying. Remember, I was losing my train of thought. Okay, so this is the last will and testament of the sixth Lubavitch Rebbe, but it is also the mission statement of the seventh Lubavitch Rebbe, our Rebbe, because like I said before, a year later to the day, in 1951, the Rebbe became the new leader of Chabad, right? Menachem Mendel Schneerson. And the first thing he ever taught was his own rendition of Basi Lagani. So he has his own Basi Lagani, and he taught a new Basi Lagani every single year until he passed away. So it's safe to say this is probably the most important thing chassidim can ever learn, because it's the last will and testament of the sixth Lubavitch Rebbe, and it ended up being the mission statement of the seventh Lubavitch Rebbe. All right, so let's start learning. Just before we start, I want to thank Maya's Place for sponsoring this video. Maya's Place is a Jewish female-owned brand, which I love, and they sell modest clothing. You guys know how much I love modest clothing, how much I think and believe that modesty is empowering for women. I'm currently wearing their dress. This is the Modal turtleneck ribbed dress. It's so soft and beautiful. I have it in 2 or 3 colors. I put the link in the description box, and you can press it and order some really nice modest clothing. Okay, we're about to start the Myar. Just before we do, I want to let you know I've put 2 links in the description box. One is the Myar in English, and one is the Myar in Hebrew. You choose whichever one you want to follow along with in the language that is most comfortable for you. I'm going to read in Hebrew and translate into English. Are you ready? Let's go. Basi Lagani Achaisi Kala. I've come into my garden, my sister, my bride. This is a verse from Song of Songs, written by King Solomon. And it is God speaking. Hashem is speaking. I have come into my garden, my sister, my bride. The context of Hashem saying this is, after Moses, built the Mishkan, the tabernacle, Hashem says these words. That's the context of this verse, and you need to know that. So Moses builds the tabernacle, the Mishkan, and all of a sudden Hashem says, Basi Lagani Achaisi Kala. I've come into my garden, my sister, my bride, which means I'm coming into the world. Hashem calls this world my garden. Okay? So again, Moshe builds the Mishkan, and Hashem all of a sudden says, I've come into my garden, my sister, my bride. Now the Midrash is going to explain this. What the heck does this mean? We're going to talk about it. The Isab Midrash Rabbah, and it explains in the Midrash what is going on in this verse. This is very confusing. What is Hashem talking about here? Legan ing sivkan. Hashem didn't say the garden. Ela legani. But Hashem says to my garden. The Midrash is explaining something very important here. Hashem says, I've come into my garden, my sister, my bride. The Midrash says, Hashem didn't say the garden. I'm coming into a garden. I'm coming into a garden. Hashem says, I'm coming into my garden. And this is like mind-blowing when you understand what Hashem is actually saying. This has 2 implications. Number 1, it's possessive, legani, my garden, which means Hashem owns it. It belongs to Hashem. Number 2, it means that Hashem has to have been here before, because it can't be his if he was never here. If a home belongs to you, I'm coming to my house. That usually means you've been in the house before and you're coming back. I went to Publix and I'm coming back home. I was in my house and I left and I'm coming back. The Midrash is saying here, the fact that Hashem says legani, to my garden, means that he's been here before. When Hashem says, Moses built the tabernacle and I'm coming into the world, Hashem is really saying, Moses just built the tabernacle, the Mishkan, and I'm coming back into the world. Which means Hashem must have been here before. Because he doesn't say the garden, he says my garden. That's the first point of the Myar. And even more than this, and this is so beautiful, and remember I told you that this is like the antidote to depression? Because we can oftentimes see this world as very dark and depressing, and like no one is guiding us, and we're just floating in the ether, and we're all screwed. And it's just like a jungle here. It's just a free-for-all. Hashem calls this world my garden and my bridal chamber. Ugh. It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. Hashem calls this world my garden, my bridal chamber. So let's go. Lagan in Ksiv Khan, we just read this, I'm reading it again. Hashem doesn't say to the garden, he says to my garden. And not just that, lignuni, to my bridal chamber. This is on purpose. This meaning like the Gani and Gnuni. Gani means my garden. Gnuni means my bridal chamber. The letters are like the same. They're connected. To show you how precious and important this world is, and by the fact that Hashem calls it my bridal chamber. Well, let's discuss, what is a bridal chamber? A bridal chamber is a place where two human beings unclothe themselves completely in every single way. They strip off everything that is not pure essence, and they come together and become one. A bridal chamber is a place of essence. That's all it is. Two human beings who are mentally naked, emotionally naked, physically naked, spiritually naked. There is nothing there besides two souls who are coming together to be one. Hashem describes this world as his bridal chamber, which means this is the world where Hashem could be the most himself. This is where God feels most comfortable. This is where God reveals himself. A bridal chamber is where two human beings who usually have a mask on, who can't really share the truth with the whole world, they unveil themselves, they reveal themselves completely to each other. And that is specifically in the bridal chamber. Well, Hashem calls this whole world not only my garden, possessive, like it's a garden and it's mine, and I've been here before. It's not just that. It's also my bridal chamber. It's where I reveal myself. It's where I feel most at home. Okay? Let's move on. Lemakom shahaya ikari batchila, to the place where my essence was originally. Okay, I'm just saying this like a normal person, like, oh, Hashem said that this world was where his essence was originally. Well, this is like an atomic bomb in Judaism for for a long time, for many years. In Judaism, this world was deemed to be very dark and sinful and gross and disgusting. And you just do as many mitzvos, as many commandments as you could to do good in this world, and then get into heaven where you can actually be close to God, and like keep the blinders on in this world, because this world is dirty and sinful and too sexual and too human and too material. And the next world is where the party's at. This Maamar is saying the exact opposite, which is why this video might take a little bit longer, because we're going into the nitty-gritty of this teaching. When the Midrash says, L'makom shahaya ikari batchila, that Hashem says, this world is not only my garden, it's not only my bridal chamber, it's L'makom shahaya ikari batchila, it's the place where my essence was originally. This goes against what we learned for like generations, that this world is gross, that this world is dark. Hashem is saying, this world is where it is my home. It's where my essence was originally revealed. That's like explosive. That's revolutionary. You can find, if you're looking for me, God, you can find me the most in this world. Don't wait for the next world. You can find me here more. Again, Chassidus always flips everything on its head. We're obviously going to have a question like, what the heck happened? Well, if Hashem is so present in this world, how come I can't find him? How come I can't see him? How come I can't feel him? Here we go. Again, explosive. That originally, At first, in the beginning, Hashem's essence was revealed in this world completely. Completely. So what happened? And this is why, let's not go there. It's going to take me on a tangent. We're about to talk about what happened in the world. What is the history of the world? And why is life so hard? And why are there cancer wards? Why are there children's wards in cancer hospitals? And why is there the war in Israel? And why do people die? And why do bad things happen? How come I can't find God in the world? We're going to discuss it. Okay. We're about to talk about the history of creation and the world and human beings and everything. So what happened? How come I don't sense God in the world like we used to be able to? Well, let's talk about it. Through the first sin, the sin of the tree of Adam and Eve eating from the tree, the tongue twister. Through the very first sin, nistalka hashchina me'eretz l'rakia. God's presence in the world left. So in Kabbalah, I believe it's Kabbalah, it explains that there are 7 firmaments until you kind of like hit heaven. Well, Hashem, the second they did this first big sin, Hashem's Shechina, his presence in the world, it departed from the earth to the first firmament. So a little bit. Hashem's presence departed a little bit. And we're going to discuss what this actually means. And through the sin, of Cain, who killed his brother Hevel, and then Enosh, who was the first person to ever worship idols. Through those two next big sins, so sin number 2 and 3, Hashem Shechina went from the first firmament to the second firmament, and from the second firmament to the third firmament. Hashem is slowly but surely departing from the world. And after that, through the Mabul, the people were so sinful and Hashem had to wipe out humanity besides Noah and his family with the flood. Through that big sin, Hashem departed the world again from the third firmament to the fourth firmament. There were 3 more big sins. Dor HaFlaga, this is not from the Myar, but I learned it. Dor HaFlaga, which is the Tower of Babel. Sodom, when the people, Sodom, they were just really bad people and Hashem totally destroyed them. And the last big sin, again, this is not in the Myar, but I want to let you know so you know it, just to know. The last one was Mitzrayim. Actually, it was the Mitzrayim of Avraham when they tried to rape Sarah. So those are the 7 big sins that pushed God out of the world. Now, what does it mean that Hashem was pushed out of the world? I have to drink water, sorry. Huge Stanley cup. Okay, much better. Okay. What does it mean that Hashem was pushed out of the world? I'll give you a perfect example. First of all, Hashem can never be not in the world at all because things don't exist without him. Which, whatever, means that Hashem recreates existence at all times, or else the world would stop existing as if it never existed. It's not even like it existed and now it stopped. It would be like it never was. So Hashem has to constantly invest himself in creation, which means he's in the world. So what does it mean that Hashem was departing the world? Well, I'll give you a perfect example. How do you feel? Okay, compare the way you feel when you walk down the street in like New York City or New Jersey or Florida or China, wherever you are in the world, Las Vegas. Compare that to how you feel in Israel, walking down the streets in Jerusalem. Compare that to how you feel when you visit the Kotel, the Western Wall. There's a massive difference. That's because, what is the difference before we tell, why? The difference is you can feel and sense God in Israel more than you can in any other place. I'll give you a perfect example. I was on a birthright trip when I was 18. And I would say a majority of the young adults on the birthright trip knew pretty much nothing about Judaism, very little about Judaism. And when we went to the Western Wall, majority of the girls I was with at the time started crying. Like on the spot, en masse, they all started crying. They were overwhelmed by the spirituality at the Western Wall. Like really, truly, they were touched to the core. What is that? Well, at the Western Wall, you can taste godliness. The air is different there. Your whole body senses Hashem. You just feel holy. There's holiness in the air. That's what it means that Hashem's Shekhinah, his presence, was departing from the world. The world, the entire world once felt like the Western Wall feels now. Actually, it was much more than that. And we're going to go into it in a minute. We know this from the Torah. Adam and Eve lived a perfectly spiritual life. They were, sorry to say this, butt naked, and they didn't even realize. It was a beautiful thing because they only saw God. When the Friedrich Rebbe, the sixth Lubavitch Rebbe, says that Hashem was being pushed out of the world, we're saying that Hashem's presence is not as tangible. It's not, you can't sense it as much. You don't feel God in the world as much as you once did. The whole world used to feel like Israel feels now. Okay? That's what it means that you don't sense Hashem in the world as much. Okay. Where were we? Okay. And so where do we find proof of this in the Torah? Well, how do you know this is what happened? There's a pasuk, there's another verse in Genesis, in Bereshis. Vayishma es kol havaya Elokim etalech bagan. When after Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge, there's a verse that says, and they heard the voice, a very haunting, eerie pasuk verse. And they heard the voice of the Lord their God walking in the garden. Amar Rabbi Abba, the Midrash explains, what does this mean? They heard Hashem's voice walking in the garden. What the heck does that mean? Mehalech in Ksiv Khan, it doesn't say they heard the voice walking. Ela mithalech. But it heard it walking itself. Mithalech is reflexive. It means it's doing it to itself. Meaning Hashem almost took himself by the hand and was walking himself. Kafetz va'azil, kafetz va'azil. Hashem was jumping and going, jumping and going. The Friedrich Rebbe, the sixth Lubavitch Rebbe, is using this as proof that Hashem wasn't just walking in the garden. He wasn't angry. You ate from the tree. I'm going to walk towards you and tell you. Hashem was leaving the garden. Hashem was leaving the garden. The moment they ate from the tree of knowledge, and this is the most magnificent part to me, it's like explosion. You actually can see there's a cosmic shift in the universe the moment they eat from the tree of knowledge. The second they eat from the tree of knowledge, everything changes. First, immediately they notice that they're naked. They were perfectly naked, blissfully, they were naked and didn't care 30 seconds before. Also, they run and hide. That moment, they're fully grown adults. They cover themselves quickly and they run to the bushes. They're afraid. There was no potential for danger or fear 30 seconds before. The moment they eat from the tree, Hashem's presence departs from the world, and all of a sudden, there's a vacuum. The moment Hashem is not completely in the world, there's room for darkness, there's room for evil, there's potential for murder, which is what happens with their son. Their son, Cain, kills their son, Hevel. That could have never happened if they didn't eat from the tree. Because when God is not in your presence, you're not aware of true reality is. The Lubavitch Rebbe, our Rebbe, used to say, an eye that sees and an ear that hears. Every child needs to know that there is a God, and that God has eyes that see and ears that hear. Not literally, right? It's God consciousness. Someone is watching you. That will make the world a better place. God is watching you. Adam and Eve had that consciousness, and the moment that they sin, God departs from the world. And all of a sudden, they're afraid. All of a sudden, they cover themselves. They have self-consciousness. All of a sudden, their son has the potential to become a murderer, which he does. He's not born yet, but there is darkness in the world all of a sudden. Okay, let's go to the good part. Okay, so what the heck do we need to do to fix this? Because this sucks, right? Okay. Ve'achar kach amdu shivat tzadikim v'haridu es hashchina lamata. And thank God, after this, just like there were 7 big sins, there are 7 tzadikim, perfectly righteous people, who bring God back into the world. Avraham zoche v'horid es hashchina merkia zayin lavav. Avraham was the first person, Abraham, the first Jew. He metaphorically pulled God back into the world from the 7th firmament to the 6th. The Yitzchak mevav lahei, and Yitzchak from the 6th to the 5th. And there were 5 more people, the last one being Ad ki Moshe, Shehu HaShvi'i. Moshe was the 7th to bring God back all the way into the world. Haridu lamata ba'aretz. He brought God back into the world with the Mishkan, the tabernacle. That, remember Moses builds the tabernacle, the Mishkan. That is when God says, Basi lagani achai sikala. I have come back into my garden. Moshe brought me back into my garden. Okay, I'm screaming. I get very passionate. And that, when Moses brings Hashem back into the world, that is when Hashem says, Bas yilagani achai sikala. I've come back into my garden, my sister, my bride, because there were 7 holy people who understood what this world was, who understood that this world is my garden. It's my home. It's my bridal chamber where I can fully reveal myself. It's my bridal chamber where I can be vulnerable. I can show myself to people through the Torah, through the mitzvos. Everything should be clicking for you right now, you know? Hashem can reveal himself completely in this world. To people, to us. It's his bridal chamber. And Avraham knew that. Yitzchak knew that. Yaakov knew that. Moses knew that. And they brought God back into the world. So we're going to end off this Maamar asking, well, what do we need to do? What the heck do I need to do? I'm not Moses. I'm not Abraham. How can I help the situation? I don't like not feeling God in the world. I don't like the darkness that is vacuum sealed into the world because there is room for it, because Hashem is not in the world completely. Well, we're going to find out now. And this is so beautiful. I am at a loss for words how to describe how beautiful this is. V'ikar giloi elokus haya bebeis hamikdash. And God's essence, after he was brought into this world, was revealed the most in the Beis Hamikdash, in the Holy Temple, right? We had 2 holy temples. First, it was revealed in the Mishkan, and then the Mishkan wasn't good enough. Hashem wanted a Beis Hamikdash. He wanted a holy temple, and that's where you could find God. That's where God was revealed. Once upon a time, with Adam and Eve, he was revealed in the whole world. But some bad things happened, and then Moshe brought Hashem back. And so Moshe brought Hashem back in the Mishkan. Now Hashem has a designated place called the tabernacle where you can come and associate yourself with God. That's where you can find God. And after that, King David and his son, King Solomon, came and said, no, we want to build a bigger house for Hashem where the world can find God. And they built the 2 holy temples. It's not enough. And this is where you come in. The Kiddichtiv, and there's a pasuk, Asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'socham. Hashem says to Moses to tell the Jewish people, build for me, listen to the grammar on this, build for me a mikdash, a temple, and I will dwell within them. Obviously, this doesn't make sense. It should say, b'socholo ne'amar. It should say, build for me a temple and I will dwell within it. Ela b'socham, but it doesn't. Hashem makes a purposeful mistake. I will dwell within them because Besoch kol echad ve'echad. Hashem wants to dwell in every single person. Hashem doesn't want to be stuck within the confines of a mishkan, of a tabernacle. Hashem is not satisfied with being stuck in the confines, being only revealed within the confines of the holy temple, the first holy temple and the second holy temple. Hashem wants to be revealed throughout the whole entire world. Besoch kol echad ve'echad. That is only possible through human beings. When every single person becomes a Beis Hamikdash, becomes a holy temple, that is the prophecy of Mashiach, that the whole world will be filled with the knowledge of God. How? You will be filled with the knowledge of God, and you will be around the world. It's like a Chabad house, right? Hashem is saying, it's not enough. I don't want a Mishkan. I don't want a Beis Hamikdash. Besoch kol echad ve'echad. You must become a Beis Hamikdash. You must become a Mishkan. What the heck does that mean? I say heck a lot, I know. Well, I'll tell you. It means you become an ambassador of God. What's an ambassador? The heck is an ambassador? I'm joking. What's an ambassador? An ambassador is someone who, when you look at them, you see immediately who they represent. So let's say the ambassador from Germany, the German ambassador. When you look at them, you immediately think, okay, this person represents Germany. When you see, I don't know, Brazil's ambassador, you see them and you immediately think, okay, they represent Brazil. An ambassador of God, you see them and they remind you that there's a God in the world. That's what it means to be a Beis Hamikdash. You are an ambassador of God. I can't think of any better example than the Lubavitcher Rebbe. You looked at the Rebbe and you saw holiness. Like immediately, even today, the picture I have on my wall, you see the Rebbe and it's pure holiness. It's a stark reminder of what's true, that there's a God in the world. There's an eye that sees and an ear that hears. V'zehu basi lagani, the lignuni, and this is what it means when Hashem says, I've come into my garden, my sister, my bride. L'makom shahaya ikari batchila, I'm coming back to the place where I originally was. Again, this flies in the face of traditional Judaism where it says this world sucks, wait for the next world. No, Hashem is in this world and he wants you to reveal this world for what it actually is. Because Hashem's essence was originally in this lowest world. So we might look at this world and say, oh, it's so lowly, it's so sinful, it's so dark, it's so gross and dirty. No, this is Hashem's garden. This is Hashem's bridal chamber, and he wants you to reveal it for what it is. And you must become one of those people who brings God back into the world, so we can live kind of in a way like Adam and Eve did, where Hashem fills the whole world. And that is the prophecy of Mashiach. And that's all, folks. All right. I can't breathe. Okay. Have a great night, and I hope this touched you. Leave the comments. Let me know what you thought, and God bless you.